There are lots of different ways to eat a meal in Texas. For example, a West Texas meal would often include things like chicken fried steak, mashed potatoes with gravy, maybe some enchiladas with beans and rice. And the side dishes would probably be things like squash casserole, macaroni and cheese. And of course, the desserts would probably be things like cake and cobbler and pie. And when you eat that kind of a meal, it sticks to your ribs. You're full for a good long time. But then if you drive over to downtown Austin, Texas, and you eat in one of those places in downtown Austin, you might get a very different kind of meal. You would probably have something like organic kale and arugula salad with vinaigrette dressing, mahi-mahi with peach salsa, steamed broccoli, and for dessert perhaps a poached Asian pear with 1 scoop of fat-free lemon sorbet topped with a raspberry infusion. It's delicious. It's light and healthy, but after an hour or two, you're hungry again. Some meals stay with you longer than others. All of us have a deep hunger in our hearts that no earthly food can satisfy, not even with all the food in a super Walmart. That hunger that's deep inside our hearts is a hunger for God, for meaning in life, for true joy, and for eternity. That hunger has been planted in your heart by God. And it is an existential hunger that no physical food can possibly satisfy. If you're parents and you're raising little kids, you could give your little kids all of the candies and cookies and ice cream that they ask for. But if you don't give them your love and your attention, they're still going to be hungry deep down inside their hearts. Those of you men who are married, you could take your wife to the best restaurant in the country. You could treat her to the finest food on the menu. Appetizers, steak, lobster, elegant dessert, expensive wine, etc. But if you don't give her love and tenderness and faithfulness, her heart is still going to be hungry deep down inside. Food and drink in this world are very important, but they don't last forever. They feed us for a few hours, and that's it. Well, in today's first reading from Exodus chapter 16, the people of Israel were on their journey from slavery in Egypt to freedom in the Promised Land. And as they were going on their long journey through the desert, God provided food for them day by day. In the evenings, quail would come and land, and they could eat those quail, and they would have protein. And He would send down little bits of what the Bible calls manna. So what is manna? It's very possible that manna that they were finding on the ground in the desert were these tiny flakes on the ground under a certain type of desert tree in the Middle East, which is called the tamarisk tree. That tree emits little droplets of resin, and they fall on the ground, and they become little flakes. And if you collect up those flakes, you can make it into something to eat. So it's very possible that what they were doing was getting the flakes on the ground under the tamarisk trees and turning that into some kind of little cakes that they could eat and stay alive. It was just enough food to sustain them for one day at a time, and no more. And that was to remind them that they depend completely on God. They didn't have storehouses full of food. They had just enough that God would give them to survive day by day. And that's a very important lesson. You depend completely on God. Well, in today's gospel from John chapter 6, When Jesus gives us his bread of life discourse, he compares himself with that manna that the Israelites ate in the desert. And he reminds us that the food that they ate lasted no more than a day, and then they were hungry again. However, Jesus lets us know that he is the bread of eternal life. And he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never hunger, and whoever believes in me will never thirst. Don't work for food that perishes, but rather for the food that endures for eternal life. And that's Jesus Christ. When he feeds us with himself in the Eucharist, he gives us food for our soul that sustains us for eternal life. Holy Communion brings about what we call divine indwelling. Divine indwelling is a mutual indwelling where we live in God and God lives in us because we have received him in Holy Communion. That's what we call divine indwelling. And that divine indwelling is so powerful that it's capable of being food for the journey of our soul to eternal life in heaven. I know that many of you who are watching this video today are not able to go to church at this time to receive Holy Communion. And I pray that a time will come when you will be able to receive the Eucharist in person, whether it's in the church or at home, so that you can receive the real thing, Jesus Christ, who is the bread of life, and receive him into your body and soul.